When rates started to skyrocket, you lost 40% of your purchasing power. As we all know, rates have gone up like crazy, but all things come to an end. Over the last 6 weeks, bond yields have dropped 0.8%. That's what controls the cost of lending for banks on long-term fixed products. As a result of those bond yields dropping, fixed rates have started to drop. As a result of those fixed rates dropping, your purchasing power is starting to recover. The average Canadian household regained about $41,000 of their purchasing power. For every $100,000 of income you have, you're going to regain about $31,500 of purchasing power on a mortgage. So the question is, what do we do with it? That's the discussion I want to have with you. It's something I want to have a little bit of a talk about because I don't know the exact answer. I do know in 2022, the Canadian government had CMHC do a study. They spent almost $20 million figuring out what's kind of the future of the Canadian housing market. And they came to a few conclusions. It is brutally expensive in BC and Ontario to live, whether as an owner or as a renter. They figured out there's a 20-year low of construction workers relative to 2.8 million units of housing that are expected to be built between now and 2030. They also identified in order to bring the cost of living down to an acceptable level, and they set an acceptable level of about 44% of the average Canadian's income going towards housing. To hit that level, they need to build an additional 3.5 million units of housing for a total of about 5.2 million units between 2022 and 2030, all while having a 20-year low of construction workers. My personal take as a mortgage broker is it's not going to happen. And they all but said as much at the end of the study. They said there was no clear answers available and that drastic change would be required to make these numbers happen. In other words, it's not happening. So what do we do as Canadians? We know that the population's growing at record levels. The cost of rent is skyrocketing. People are bailing out of BC and Ontario to head for Alberta and lower cost markets, but they're suffering now. And the cost of rent just keeps going up and up and up. So what do we do? It doesn't seem like renting is a good solution. You have very little control over the cost of your rent. And frankly, it doesn't seem like it's going to get better anytime soon. My guess is that if rates keep dropping, if we start to recover and we see interest rates drop, I know for a fact that due to the way the qualifying works, people are going to start regaining more of their purchasing power, which means they'll be able to buy a more expensive house. The problem is we're going to be going into a spring market in the next few months. We're just starting winter, but before we know it's going to be spring. Spring is typically the busiest time for home buying. So if we take the combination of recovering and lowering rates, boosting the ability to buy a home and qualify for a mortgage while going into a spring market, what's going to happen to all those people that sat on the sidelines waiting for the housing market to crash or for prices to drop? My guess is at some point they're going to say, screw it and get back into the market. You have more people wanting to buy, qualifying for more money, competing for less housing. I think we're going to see prices go up. But that's what I think. What I'm curious about is, what do you think? Are housing prices going to drop? Is a recession going to hit us? Job loss going to happen and the housing market's going to crack open like an egg? Or are we going to see prices go up and up and up? I do know at some point this has to stop. The cost of housing is way too expensive in Canada. It's one of the worst countries in the world for it. At some point, they're going to need to figure out a solution. Now, the good news is the government knows what that solution is. We in the industry know what that solution is. It's more housing. Per capita, we have substantially lower housing than the US does and most other markets in the world. So it's one of those things. They need to figure out how they incentivize more people to build more homes. And they've come up with programs like MLI Select that allow people to take on extreme leverage and long amortizations to buy single family houses and build 6plexes, 8plexes, 10plexes. This is helping, but this isn't necessarily the solution we want. I think most Canadians want to live in a home or maybe a townhome. They don't necessarily want to live in a little box. So what do we do? What's going to happen? How can we fix this? Whether that's as professionals in the industry or just as Canadians. Is there anything we can do? Are the landlords at fault? Is it the government? Is it the local municipalities that have led to one of the slowest housing development processes in the world? Is it the fact that when you try to build, if a developer tries to build a condo in Vancouver, almost 25% of their costs are just fees and taxes to build in the permitting process? What's the problem? How do we fix it? I think the best thing we can do is talk about it. So drop in the comments. Let me know what you think. Let's talk. Let's debate. Let's argue. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to have a conversation. So let's figure this out together.